Well, everybody, welcome to the Nature Journal Club. This is going to be a really, really fun class, and it's going to be, I'd like to introduce my dear friend, this is Deb Brady.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. And Deb and I went to Tanzania together, and we were on the Nature Journal Club safari that we had out there 1 year ago, I guess last summer, and it was a ton of fun. But one of the things that goes on in this, instead of you're like everybody look, there's a cheetah, click, 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 like let's go see a lion. It was like, oh my gosh, and we'd find things, people would stop and slow down, and everybody was sketching and journaling. We also had a lot of time for people to share journals, and if you show me mine, yours, I'll show you mine, and you could steal ideas from other people about. You're like, oh, I saw that same thing, but oh, I love the way you caught that kind of the angle of the back of the rhinoceros or whatever it was that you saw. Looking at other people's journals is a really, really inspiring thing. Well, we're looking through Deb's journals, and she brought her journal, which you will really like. We've got, there is a seat right here if somebody wants this one. When people were looking through Deb's journal, there's also this one here if you like comfy chairs. That's a good one. But here's what happened is that we saw that in Deb's journals there were drawings and sketches and notes and all these sort of things, but she also had these really fun, playful titles and subtitles. And you could scan across the page and these sort of moments would come out in these sort of highlighted words. And it was different than kind of formal calligraphy. This was this really playful thing that everything sort of seemed to be appropriate with this sort of the vibe of our nature journaling. So we would look at those and we'd look at those, and finally we said, like, Deb, would you show us some of your tricks? Would you do a little workshop for us about how you're doing this? And at the end of the of our trip, she sat down. It must have been 45 minutes or an hour, and in that time, there's one chair right there, and there's another one right there in the back. So in that time, she showed us things about lettering that I had never seen before. It wasn't one of these things like, okay, this is chancellery script, and in order to do this, this is how you make your E, and oh no, that's not right. You make it like this. No, that's still not right. You go, you need to practice more. It wasn't one of those things. It was, here's like this grab bag of tricks, which I can't apply immediately. And all the way home on the airplane, I was like putting in all these titles and just playing with this really creative, fun way to goof around with lettering. And it's so much fun. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. And you're going to see that there's lots of ways that these little tricks of messing around with words, they can apply all over your journals. And so you're going to enjoy it. You're also going to find that at the end of this, we're going to have some time for you to play with a whole bunch of material. So this will be a real hands-on thing. I'm going to suggest you take notes through the first part, and what are some of the strategies, and then you'll have a chance to use all these new tools and see what you like and how those work for you. So we're delighted that you're doing this. It's been fun for me. I've gone along to all these lectures, and with each one, we've found that she's added more and more tricks to each lecture. So you guys are going to be the beneficiaries of all of the stuff that has come before. We're setting up a few more chairs now, but everybody come on up and please come on in and join us, and welcome Deb Brady.
Thank you for having me here. I am a freelance artist, but my day job is making signs for Trader Joe's, and all the signs at Trader Joe's are handmade. The shelf signs, the big display signs, and everything in between. Each store has its own team of artists, and I happen to work at the Mountain View store. That said, I came into sign making and lettering kind of through the back door. The most education I had, a little typography when I was studying graphic arts, but way back when I was in high school, I had this art teacher who he himself had worked in a little neighborhood grocery store, and he made the signs that read apples 2 for $1, 2 for 50 cents, or whatever was the going rate at that time. And he had to make them fun and catchy and getting people to want to purchase the apples. And he just showed me some tricks, how to make these letters, how to put some shadows on, some other splashes of fun and bells and whistles. And I just carried that throughout, and no matter whether I'm sending a package through the mail or just making a note that says back in 5 minutes, I always have used that kind of writing. Ultimately, I ended up working at Trader Joe's and getting onto the sign team, and that's where I met up with my fellow sign team member, and we're both strongly influenced by comics. In the comic books, you're always seeing these words like kaboom and pow and whap, and they're fun. The lettering is fun. Even if you don't like the art of the drawing behind it, the lettering just pulls you in and makes you want to figure out what's going on. And so my teammate and I, we're both inspired by that, and we take on that kind of lettering. So I'm not following the rules of typography or formal lettering. I don't do calligraphy, but I just like my words and letters to work together and have fun. I'm going to pass around some font styles that inspire me. Feel free to take one if you like, and maybe I'll send them all in the same direction.
Pass it to Joe. That's it. Yeah, you keep one.
Here's another one. I'm going to set the other one underneath.
Okay.
So these are just some different lettering styles, comic-y, that you can apply and get inspired by and pull out parts that you like to form your
This is the
own.
first one, if they want it.
And I'm also going to pass around some comics that I have open to pages that have the lettering that I'm talking about. Just take a good look at it, see how they do it. They've got different shadings, different gradations of color. Sometimes they're taking out the color from what's going on the page and emphasizing that. Sometimes they outline the whole thing, sometimes it's just shadows. But I'll pass these around. It's just looking at the pages. If you're bored, you can read the comics.
Let's start some of these in the back.
So for me, when I look at letters, when I look at words, I just see their character. I anthropomorphize a lot, and lettering is not any different for me than anything else. So I'm just going to give you some basic terminology that is in the typography world. It's not real important, I just think it's really fun to know, and as you've got this in the back of your mind when you're making your letters, it might help. We're all familiar with upper and lowercase, capitals and small letters. Some letters have an ascender, the part that goes up above the main core of what's going on, and a descender. Letters have a spine, and the S is really a nice example of the curved spine. Some letters have an I. Some letters have shoulders. You can just feel it when you're looking at M's and H's. And some letters, depending on the font style, have little ears that stick out. Some letters have arms. Some letters have legs, or both. Some styles have, when there's a type of a serif or a different ending, this is called a teardrop, when it's just dripping down like that. Some letters have tails. And some letters in the serif font, this would be called a beak. I work mainly with two different styles, which is the serif style, and the serif style is where they have the bars that go across the top and the bottoms. I don't use serif style too much, it's a lot of work, because put in those bars when you're trying to do the work quickly just gets complicated figuring out how you want the bars to go and what style you're going to use. So mostly I work with sans serif or without serif. And they're just basic block letters, and there's a lot of things you can do with them. It's not as rigid and stiff as this might look, but there's no serif, so I don't have to figure out all that extra stuff. Within some lettering styles, there's the condensed, which means everything's getting squished together. And all the holes, like the hole in the O, just gets squished together tighter. And that might work for a space, and you may want to emphasize how something might be condensed in your image by putting that in your text style. There's also extended, where everything just gets spread out and elongated. And that can work if you've got a particular word that's long, but then you have some subtitle underneath. You might want to just make some extended letters. And there's also the tall letters, which are tall in two ways. So if you think about it, like the A, if you have the crossbar at the bottom, then it's very tall. Or if you have the crossbar at the top, it's all legs and still very tall. Two different personalities, but tall letters, and good way to fit it into a tight corner space if you're trying to get some words in there. So that's basic fine characteristics of letters. Then there's the tools that I use. And at the store we use a lot of chisel tip markers, those Sharpie markers. They're easy. They give me a quick broad stroke. I can go into a thin stroke pretty quickly. It's similar but not the same as a calligraphy pen. A calligraphy pen, you can get that broad stroke and go into that thin stroke without ever lifting the pen. To me, it's something I have not mastered. I haven't practiced it, but it's very elegant. So if you're looking for that kind of style, I would encourage you to play with calligraphy pens and get to know them. They can really produce some stuff that otherwise you're going to try to outline it or work way too hard to get something that simple. There's a medium tip pen. It's bullet tip. It's blunt. Good for filling in or enhancing. The fine tip I use to outline my letters. Pencil I use if I am not confident to just put down the strokes in the pen first. I want to just sketch it out first. I'll use the pencil. And then there's also brush tip pens, which will be similar to a calligraphy pen and a chisel tip in that you can get a nice broad stroke, go into a fine stroke, and you can get a lot in between depending on how you use your brush. So if you're inclined to paint, definitely you might like the brush tip pen for some colors that you may not want to mix and all with your paint. So those are the tools. Now, how do I make a letter? What do I do when I want to got an image on my page. Pencil here. Say I've drawn some quail. And I decide I want to, title my page Quail. I could do a couple things. I can right away just take my pen and write Quail. I'm using a broad tip pen. So that's pretty bold. That works pretty well. But maybe I don't have, and I'm not confident enough to put in those strokes with the pen flat out. So I would do this with my no photo blue pencil or a really light pencil, but I'm going to do it darker here so hopefully you'll see. I'm going to pencil in, can we see this? Yeah. Pencil in my letters, and I'm using the block letters, and I'm just doing the outline of the block letters. And then I'm going to color them in. And I want to do a couple of tones on this one. So I'm going to start with my light color and start at the bottom. And I'm just coloring inside my pencil lines. here. And bring that down the top. And I don't mind if it bleeds in a little bit into, in this case, it's fine with me. I didn't draw like a strict line, like I don't want it going past this tone. I don't mind if it's popping down in there. Okay, so that's fun, that works. They're both fine, I could walk away and that's good. But I want a little more pop in my lettering. So I'm going to start with an outline of my lettering on both of these. And I would be using a fine pen. I'm using this wider Sharpie, just again, for the sake of display. I was asked in a previous workshop if I intentionally overlap my letters. It's not something I plan to do, I just do it. And I'm okay with that in my style. I like the comfort of the letters getting close to one another. I don't feel they're interfering with one another. But I don't like too much space between the letters. A little bit's okay, and if they do connect, that's fine. Again, this is a very playful style that we're working to get to. It's not a strict typographic, follow the rules style. I break the rules all the time with this stuff. Anyway, so this could work. This is like, okay, great, I've got some good letters, I can read it, it pops, but I still want some more. So, another thing to consider is what's called a drop shadow. And imagine a light source up here, and on my lower right, I'm going to drop in a shadow. You can have a drop shadow on the lower left. You can have not a dropping shadow, but an upper shadow if for some reason you want your light source coming from down below. But probably the most common drop shadow is the lower right. So I'm going to go in there and just give a bolder drop down line on my letters. So on my U, right at the very top, I'm not starting at the top and outlining it. I'm just coming down just a little bit as though it were dropping down below it. Now when I have lettering overlap like that, I don't necessarily have the shadow overlap. In other words, like the word is the unit within itself and the shadow is behind the whole unit. And it can be as fat or thin as you want it to be. It's up to you what your light source is and what your lettering is. So that's pretty cool. But I still want more. So another really simple and fun thing to do, so I don't start my pen here. This is I'm going to put in some highlights. I'm using these opaque acrylic-based paint pens. So I'm going to put in a highlight. My light source is coming from here. I've got my shadow down on my lower right. So my highlights are going to be on the upper left. And I'm just a quick stroke. And suddenly, the word has a lot of dimension. You can add a little bit more on the crossbars if that's what you're seeing. You can throw in a couple of little dots just to dress it up a little. So that has a lot of impact, but we can still go further. And this is entirely up to you how decorative or non-decorative you want to make your journal pages, but we can put in some, like a halo. And this might require you going back in with your black shadow pen and cleaning up your shadows because you're adding in some color and ultimately going to go over the lines. So that just takes it to another world there. So when this would dry, I'd probably go in and just brighten up some of the black area that I went over. And I can still do more. Because now I can sort of define this halo a little bit. I'm not necessarily going to outline that all the way, but just throwing some lines down in some areas just to define this outside shape that's behind it. So that was pretty simple, but it's gone from just simple, bold strokes of what you had here into a whole designed word, and all with, you know, all the tools on hand, no matter what you're using. Other things you can do too with this is not just a line to define it, you can throw some more dots in there. I mean, you can overwork it, don't get me wrong, but and I am overworking this for the sake of the demonstration, but choose your stuff and pull it out, and whatever might be going on your page, let it reinforce some of the things you're talking about or you've already drawn and painted. One thing when I'm out in the field and I'm trying to do more of pages that have just things blocked into them, and I can have loose drawings in there too, but when I get home I might end up with, you know, a glaring splotch of space. And to demonstrate this, I've gone back into one of my old nature journals, and I had drawn a thrasher in the yard, but I had this big space here. And so I just went back in and I penciled in the word thrasher, and I penciled in I used script. I used script writing for California. So I outlined that, then I colored it, and in this case I used 3 colors, yellow going into orange going into red, and threw down just the outline. I didn't bother with the shadow on this particular one, and some highlight. One other demonstration on that. I had done a demonstration with the word owl. It's hard to read owl here. Pencil out. But I had penciled in the word owl. Then I went into it with my first color. Added a second color. This is all still in pencil. Top color. Now that can stand alone. And I did a decent job. I don't have too many little burrs sticking out, but a great thing with adding the outline is it helps to contain the letter, and if your strokes just went outside of the lines or whatever, you pull it back in. I had thrown my highlight on owl ahead of time when I thought, I do want to add the drop shadow. And part of that is I had a little more space here than I was comfortable with between my O and my W. So I went in and I didn't go right to the drop shadow. I went in and just sort of planned it. I drew it in first to make sure I knew what I wanted in case I wanted a little more or whatever, and then just went back in and colored it in. And so the difference between owl and owl just gives it that much more fun. Yes, it was a greyhound owl. So that's how basically I'm constructing letters and all. But letters themselves can be a problem. And probably one of the most problematic letters is the S. S's, we do them oftentimes, you know, it's just one stroke. I don't make my S's as bad as I used to, but I promise you, my S's were hideous when I was first doing S's. And I had to figure out a way how I need my S's to be consistent. Some days I can hit it and other days I can't. So I've learned to, or I learned at least in the beginning, a trick to making some halfway decent S's. And I put sort of a figure 8 or 2 circles on my paper. And I would be doing this in pencil or no photo blue pencil. And I mark out where I think the beginning and the end of my S is. And then I'm going to use the 2 circles as my guide, not drawing on the circles itself, but deciding how wide I want my S to be. And I've decided that so you can see where that is. And I just follow it around. It takes a little while, but I'm going to be much more happy with the S I produce rather than trying to do it all in one stroke and end up with something that's too tall, too short, too fat, where all my other letters I managed to, make be consistent. Now, once you've mastered your S's and other letters that might give you a heart attack, you have to then come face to face with words that can be difficult. The combination of all the letters together, it's a great word, but as you're writing it and trying to make your word look fun and look cohesive, the letters together aren't working. So, take the word butterfly. Which goes on forever. There we go. Okay. It's okay, but I'm really uncomfortable with the space between the 2 T's. The T's have those arms that stick out, and it's hard for them to get close because they've got their arms out and they're bumping into each other. So one way you could handle it is to write butterfly like that. And that works for me fine when I'm just doing simple handwriting. So if I were having a description and I wrote the word butterfly, I can live with that. But doing it big like that, this whole area here I'm not comfortable with it, even if I pull them in closer together. I'm still not comfortable with that whole straight line across. It's just not working. I've got all this other stuff going on, and then I've got this one big straight line here. So my solution, which is totally breaking the rules, it's not going to work in the computer or typography, is I like to bend some of these main stems on the letters and just tuck this other one just a little bit underneath there. Now I'm more comfortable with the space between the T's. It still works in that, I don't have any straight plain lines there like that. And it's just the movement of the letter and the comfort within the letters just works for me there. And it works in my style and in my journal. issues with this really, but not very playful. Bending these parts of the W in, tucking the O, lets this get closer together without being a jammed up word that you cannot read, the letters are still together. But it takes out that extra space and the rigidity of letters having a uniform spacing between them. So feel free to, bend some of the letters within the style. It just makes everything more approachable, more readable, and fun. Other things you can do with letters, and if you're familiar with the posters from the 60s and the Fillmore concert posters and all the Summer of Love kind of writing, they just invented stuff. It was all hand done. It wasn't done on the computer. And had complete fun with the letters. It's as though they decided they had a shape they were going to fill and force the letters to fit together. It's another thing to think about when you want to create your own fonts. Again, no rules. The only rule I would suggest is to have continuity. If you're going to do this style, keep it continuous throughout your word, throughout your lettering within the page anyway, at least on your titles and stuff. Another thing you can do, once you've mastered your letters, I forgot to bring my visual, but I don't know if you remember the series The Sopranos. And the logo for The Sopranos, S-O-P, R, there was no R in the word, it was a handgun on its side, which looks like an R. And the mind substitutes the handgun for the R. It has no problem reading it. You don't read it Soprano or whatever. You see the handgun, it looks like an R, you see the R, and that's it. You're comfortable with that. So I would look at letters, I would look at words and see what letters within the word you can play with and keep the word coherent, but have some fun with it. So a word I like to play with at my job is avocado.
I like this too.
So there's no O's there, but the substitution of the split avocados, the mind is fine with that, and it reads avocado. We also can, and I find vowels are often the easiest, though not the only things you can play with, but they're often the easiest to substitute with some little iconic characters. If you're out in the field viewing wildflowers, Or maybe you spotted an acorn woodpecker. Of course, all of these can be colored in and painted and further enhance the little illustration in your letter. All kinds of stuff. And I think what had captured some attention for people on the safari, we were all in the Jeep and looking at wildlife out in the Serengeti. Zebras were the animal of the day, pretty much. Zebra, 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 zebra. So we'd be drawing them, and then in between driving to the next location, I was kind of catching up and writing in my journal and just was writing about the zebras. And someone was watching over my shoulder and got all excited when I started doing lettering that was like the zebra. It's so simple, but can just twist the page into something a whole lot more fun if that's what you're going for. I mean, leopards can have spots. Tigers can have stripes, patterns, even the patterns you're seeing on birds or other animals, you can incorporate it into some open lettering like that. Or even if it's colored, you can then use a more opaque pen or paint and put something on it too. So it's endless what you can do with the letters. It's only limited by your imagination, and there's no wrong way to go about it. But I encourage you to just really play with them and start to have fun with them. So you want to create an alphabet for yourself. You really don't know where to start. You don't necessarily want to copy something else, or you just want to get to know letters. There's 26 letters, they're all different, but how can you keep them consistent within what you're doing? So I have this little system I use, just simple, just to get your brain started and thinking about what are the components of a letter and how do I get them all to get together. So I use a square or a circle or a triangle. And I use that shape to define the space that the letter has to fit into. So the B fits in the square pretty well. B has a straight spine. Now the circle, how does my B work in a circle? Well, it's going to have a curved spine. And it's going to take on more of a bubble or balloon letter type of a look. And the triangle, how am I going to fit the B in there? Well, it's going to be an odd-shaped letter, but that's what I'm going for. I'm going for an odd-shaped alphabet. And so I'm going to, again, just use the edge of the triangle. I'm going to have a smaller top and a much bigger bottom. And there you go. So, how to deal with that pesky S in these shapes. Well, here it's probably just going to take on the look of a 5. Pretty simple. Here, you're really going to feel how soft and squishy these letters can be if you put it in here. You really don't have to do much. You're just sort of tracing the circle and throwing a couple lines in there, and there's your S. And then up here, it's just going to be a strange S. This is my strange alphabet, the triangles. So there's the head, but the bottom's just going to be long, wide, and broad. But I know these letters come from the same alphabet. I know they all somehow match. And the other thing, if I didn't want just a line, I could just have a little loop there too. If I were to do an A, it's pretty much constructed in there. I just might shape the corners a little bit, but it's still pretty boxy and angular. The A in the bubble, I'm just going to bring it up a little for the two little legs and throw in a little circular opening there. And then here, because everything's so bottom heavy, I'm just going to put this opening up high, the crossbar. I can either have a really fat crossbar and bring that down, or I could have a thin crossbar and bring that down. It's up to, whatever. You'll figure it out as you're making other letters. You might decide, no, I don't like that thin crossbar, and bring down a much fatter crossbar. It's still going to have the same shape and still be within the same. That's just a basic way to start making your alphabet if you're intimidated by creating letters and trying to keep them looking like they belong together. And then you can take it to other levels from there. Some other things you can work with in words is giving them dimension and perspective. So maybe you've got a side of a building, and I probably would drop some lines in my pencil so I know where I'm going, because it'll be easy to get off track. But so you can see that perspective. Letters can have some weight. Dimension. And you can go in and use color or shading to further define that. You can use letters to further inform what's going on the page. For instance, if it's raining and your watercolors are running. And you can either make up a font to go with whatever textures or styles you want, or you can take the font that you've got and apply some of this to it, like just get the letters dripping and stuff within the style that you've already created or are using. One of the styles of lettering that I passed around is called Infestia. It's part of the insectile family of fonts. And it's made up of little insect parts. Each letter is part of an insect. And usually fonts like this are called display fonts. You're not going to write a paragraph with them because it probably won't be very readable. You may not even be able to write a whole word with them because, again, it may not be very readable. This one does read pretty well with the upper and lower case. But something to consider if you are using some kind of super decorative font is to have your first letter be that decorative style. And you may remember art history and all the illuminated texts from the middle and help me with the ages there. Middle Ages, yeah.
The
Renaissance, thank you. Where the first letter of the page was beautifully drawn and designed. And then they used their font to go on from there. So that's something too to think about if you're using font styles like this that are super decorative and don't necessarily allow you to write a whole word that's going to be easily read, but use it in the beginning. And even in your own even your own letter styles that you're creating, let that be your first letter of whatever it is you're talking about. Another thing you can do with letters is put a pattern in them. We talked about that a little bit with the stripes and all, but if you pencil in some letters, and maybe you're looking at some geological type of area where you're seeing all this different color of rock, or you're looking at a landscape where you're seeing the different shades of greens going into yellows, going into some browns and stuff like that. And go into your letters and mark it out, and let your title reflect maybe what's going on the page, and go back in with your pen. So and here you're going to pay attention to how your letters are meeting up with one another. So that orange is not just going to go equal amounts on each letter, because the pattern is going to go through the letters, through the whole word. So you're just sort of, okay, I'll probably skip that, I'll probably skip those. So now is when you would go in, because it's hard to see when I'm not sure what the word is, there's so much going on, but I know what I've got underneath. And when I outline it,
Shazam.
it's more clear what's going on. I could go in and define the pattern if I wanted or not. And again, you can apply all the other tricks to it. Another thing, you can leave your letters in outline form and put these little highlights on them without the color, without gradation or anything like that. Put the idea of a drop shadow on it. Alright, before we get into working our own alphabets and playing with the tools, anyone have any challenging letters or questions in regard to coming up with your own alphabets?
What are some, common shapes, like say the curve of C's and G's or something that, are there any things that you see a lot of that have a broad application across a bunch of different letters?
Yeah, the C's, G's, anything that has that curve can just be difficult. I mean, it's easy to make the straight lines, but the curves can really throw you off. Besides the two circles for the S, there's another way I will make an S, and I can apply this to G's and C's. I do something by putting like a flag as a little anchor there. And then I can just pull a line down like that and just let it be for a minute. And then go in and put that back end on the S. Now if I want the flag to stay there, that's fine. I could leave it there like that, or if I wanted a bigger, fatter S and I wanted it all to be bold. Just like that. You can do the same thing with the C. Just having that there sort of helps to have your mind focus like where you're starting and also where you're going to end up. Then you can go back in and finish the C, or finish a G. Some people struggle with M's as well. M's and N's. A simple way to try to get your head around the M is to think of that top part and think about where these two lines are coming down. So you're halfway there, and now and this can be deeper. If you've done this in pencil, you can make that a little deeper if you're not comfortable with that. Some more playful M's, think about that. Like, I pull the legs in at the bottom. For an N, I usually get this post in there, and then I decide, do I want like a real thin middle part, like that, or do I want it equally as fat? Another thing I tend to do a lot, and I find it helps to make letters, again, a little more friendly and cooperative with each other, is I don't have them lying flat on the line that I'm drawing on. I like the angle on the bottom of my letters like that. It just has a little more danciness, a little more movement. Like, rather than have this K come down and be smooth like that, I prefer the K to be, just have a little kick going on. Same thing with R's. Again, it goes back to what I was talking about with the characteristics of letters, arms, and shoulders, and things like that. That's where you start to think of it with some personality. And again, there's no rule in terms of it's your alphabet, you've made it, so if you want angled letters, fine. If you don't want angled letters and you want everything lined up neat and tidy, that's fine too. Another style of lettering that I like is a really top-heavy letter. Again, it just speaks to the fun of it, and I sort of get that by starting with an O. Like, that's just such a fun O compared to, I mean, nothing wrong with that O, but this one just looks more fun. Could have it be the other way also. My S would probably be pretty top heavy and just have a little.
When I was a kid, the grocery store signs fascinated me because they did overlapping lettering, where maybe half of the next letter was shown. Do you do any of that at all? Is that the 60s style?
Let me see if I, like that?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what era or style it is, but it's yours now. But yeah, I mean, that also makes it fun. Another thing to think about on your pages is lettering can go down. They don't have, it doesn't have to be linear, horizontal. And depending on what's on your page and what you want to get across, or maybe whatever space is left there. But don't feel that everything has to be linear. The Superman style of writing is fun. And it brings in that perspective again, but
When you started with quail at the beginning, you said start with the lightest color first.
Is there a reason for that, or is that the rule of thumb?
The reason why I did that is because if I were going to do a gradient type of a thing, it's easier to go back in and color over your lighter color versus going in and trying to lighten up your darker color. So on my Thrasher, on the Thrasher that I had, or I have another squirrels here. I did the same thing on the squirrels. I started with yellow and went into a little bit of orange and red so that I could have this gradient kind of look. And when I do that too, in this case I was using fine tip markers. So I went in and I colored the yellow, I brought in a little orange in here, and then I colored in the red. And when I was doing that, you can look closer later, but you can see these little lines that I let the orange and the red go down into the yellow just a little bit, which helps to give it more of a sense of that gradient. So that's, and I have my misspelling of salamander here, which I actually kind of like. But so this I was doing gradients with blues, where I started with just a ghosty kind of blue, went into a different color blue, and into the darkest blue at the top. And then just by bringing those little lines down, you just feel like they naturally bled into one another. They pulled apart from one another. And you don't have that hard defined line of here's where this color ends and here's where this one begins. So that's why I start light, because it helps me figure out what I'm doing. And at least if I went too high with the light color, I can go in with the darker color over. Whereas if I went too low with the dark color first, I can't. I'm kind of stuck with that. And feel free to spell salamander that way in the future. A little extra L there.
Sa-la-la-la-la.
Numbers?
The word salamander reminds me, is there a trick to planning out the size of your letters and spacing so that you don't run out of paper?
Yeah, and I do that all the time, and especially in my job, I do that when I'm working on big display boards. I think, oh, plenty of room, but I've started way too far over, and by the time I get over here, I've got this squished letter, and I have to do it again. There's a couple of things. If I'm out there and I'm putting lettering in while I'm out sketching, I can put it on there and everything else goes around it. But that's not usually what happens with me. Later I'm home and it's like, oh, I want to keep working on this page. So it's whatever space is left. And in that case, again, light pencil, good eraser, just pencil it in first. And sometimes I just pencil in like the stick figures of whatever letter it is. I just start out with, I know the spacing. And here's where I do leave the space between letters because I know letter is this big and I have this much space. So now I can go in and fill it out more in the style that I wanted. Oops, that's a T. So it's just, just planning it out with your pencil. I'm not good at just looking and going right in with the ink because I usually will mess that up pretty bad. You have any questions? Numbers. What's your most difficult number? Do you have one?
Yeah, 9.
Oh, nines. Yes, nines. Numbers still are difficult for me, and I'm constantly evolving with them. You start off, you make a 9 that way, but that's kind of boring. So when you try to do the, 9 like that, it ends up looking like a G, and it's really frustrating. So I think I watched someone do it one time where they started at the bottom and did the same thing. It looks like a G, but it also doesn't look like a G. And I can go from there. And if you fatten it up a little, suddenly it's not a G, it's a 9. And definitely if it's next to another number, it's not a G, it's a 9. If it were next to a word, it might pass as a G. Another kind of 9 you can make is a quotation mark kind of a 9, which, and I do these, there's a few numbers I just do backwards for whatever reason. That stroke is so much easier than going this way doesn't work for me. Going this way works for me. And so it's force of habit now. But this is probably the simplest 9 you can make, is this little quotation 9. And you just think of it like little quotation marks. 3 is my nemesis. This whole thing can just go way out of whack fast. As you can see here, this is compared to that, what am I doing? And 3, I see personalities, I see faces half the time in my numbers. So this is kind of a friendly little 3. This is kind of an angry 3, like yelling. It's like yelling at us, like. And again, I use that little flag there on the 3 sometimes, just to help me get around. And in that case, I can either make it a big fat top on the 3 when I fill it in, or I can leave it hanging there and just go around like that and fill that in. My 2s I make pretty crazy. I think I used to do my 2s from the top and go like that. Now I do this. I go, oh, I really like this 2. It reminds me of a swan. Just that whole neck. And so I make this 2. And 4s, I like the 4s with those closed tops, those kind of 4s as opposed to that kind of 4. And I like the wider top, so I'll just, and I do have the bar go all the way across as opposed to a 4 that would be not going all the way across. 8 is just 2 circles. I don't necessarily do that whole 8 like that. I do.
How do you do exclamation points?
I like that wide top, and depending, it can either be that round circular thing like I do with the dotted I, or it can be square if, that makes more sense for whatever you're doing. Question mark, there's that, but I'm finding I kind of like these kinds of question marks, which leave that space there. It's like a hook, it's like a half moon or a hook, and then the dots underneath. And there's a lot of personality in question marks. Like this is kind of a funny looking one, but you can have, just a real, again, this is where your design of your lettering, you can really just take it to whatever limit you want and decide what's going to work for you. 1s, it's, there's a 1. So I've stolen this from my coworker because I just love his 1s. They're these things, and he just has this little burr that comes off the top, and he uses, that fat top. And there's a 1. So, if there's no other questions, I want you guys to try out the pens and do a couple of things. Besides creating some letters, and you may not have time to do all 26 of your alphabet, but start playing with some ideas of what you would make an alphabet on. And then the other thing is, let's take a shape, any shape. In this case, I'm just going to draw a leaf. And put your word in the shape. It doesn't have to be the word that is the shape. You can have an abstract shape and put a word in it. But play with how those letters will fit in there and still make sense. So I have several different pens up here, and I just didn't have a table, so I put them there. That would be the easiest. I have highlighter markers, the kind you use to highlight your text when studying or wanting to pull things out. And the reason why I bring them, they're a chisel tip, which will give you that broad stroke going into a fine stroke if you want, but they also have some wild color that you're not really going to get out of your paint or some of your other markers or pencils that you have. And they can also be a nice base to put some of your other marker colors on and bring out just a whole different look on that. Sometimes if you go over your marker colors with a highlighter, it alters it in a way that you wouldn't get otherwise. I have some calligraphy pens, both a marker style and a paint pen style. About the paint pens, you need to shake them up. There's paint in here, a little ball mixes the paint. If you don't shake them up, you might have some separation. It's opaque, and the reason why I like a lot of these is just like with this here, it works great if you're using the gray paper or the brown paper. It also works great on the white paper, but it's hard to get good color on the browns and gray papers unless you're painting with gouache or some kind of acrylic or something. So this is good. There's a calligraphy version. These little green things here denote the calligraphy ones. And I have some calligraphy markers. I also have some brush pens. They're a little cheaper version of the Tombow pen. So there's the brush on one side, and on the other side is just a little nib as usual. So play with that. And the other paint pens that I have, they're a medium size. You can find them in other sizes, smaller sizes. I wrote down the names of some of the companies that these are. There's a lot of different kinds. I use these on my job, that's why I brought them, because I'm familiar with them. But again, you want to shake them up. And you might want to have a scrap paper with you just to blot it a few times. Now this is a kind of a green, and just by my experience I can see I have to shake it a lot more because it's still separating out, but it's not normally this dark. It has a little, here it comes, it's getting a little more color to it. So some of these you have to shake and work with a little bit to get the color to be where you want it to be. Other ones just come right out and are pretty cooperative. And there's two different styles of points. The Deco color has the chisel tip, and the Posca has the bullet point, the round tip. So you won't get that one broad stroke, but you can lay down some 2 or 3 strokes and you have a pretty fat letter. Or the chisel tip, 1, 2, maybe 3 strokes and you have a really nice bold letter. The other thing with the chisel tip, you can have the bold stroke, and if you use that little tip, you can then have a relatively fine tip. So you could write not only your headline type of word, but you could put some other subwords underneath without having to worry about big fat letters if you're using a tip. A little practice. I think those are all the different styles. I have one other thing here, and I use a gel pen when I'm putting the little highlights on in my journal, but I recently found these with the Posca brand, and it's a really fine tip on the white, which needs to shake up a little more. The paint kind of is not quite there yet, but on your on your pages. You can get it nice, fine, if you want to go in and put a really fine highlight. You don't want a big blurby highlight on your lettering or on your picture even. And it's, again, it's
It's a
kind of
Posca?
yeah, it's trying to think. It's a PC1M. It's bullet shaped, but it's not big and bold. It's probably about the finest tip in this kind of style. But I found it recently and I like it. The thing about the paint pens, just for your information, you're pushing down on it to get the paint to go into the tip. But when you're writing, once you've got the pen charged up with the paint, don't be pushing down because the paint will still keep coming. And you don't want it to ruin your page. So basically you're writing, and then if you're feeling like you're losing the paint, use your scrap paper, shake it up, just give it a couple of little pumps, and then go back in and start writing again. It takes a little practice to get to know it. I'm very used to these, but believe me, I've had the paint just ooze out, and there it goes. So, please come up, take some pens, try them, come back, get some different pens, try those. I'll be happy to answer any questions while you're working on some stuff.
So we do have some homework for you, because here's what's going to happen. You're thinking, oh my gosh, that trick with the S, that was mind-blowing. I'm totally never going to forget that. We'll give it 38 hours. And poof. All right, so all these things that you think you're not going to forget, like, oh, that was a really good little trick. I want to play with that. I'd like to incorporate that in my journal. What's going to happen is if you do nothing with this for the next few days, then everything you've just learned is going to disappear into that darkness behind your eyes. Next time you'll be thinking like, oh, there were some tricks. Oh gosh, but now I'm on a different journal, I can't go back and look at those notes. So here's what you have to do, is you want to, when you get home, and friends at home watching this, you have to do this too. You want to play with at least 5 words. Find different, maybe this could be going into one of your journals from before and creating a title for that page, or just choose some words, choose a sentence, play with these techniques, play with these words, mess around with it, be playful and have fun. All right? But you want to do at least 5. And challenge yourself to do some of your difficult letters. Challenge yourself to do some of those numbers. Play with those different shapes. If you mess with it, it's going to stick. But if you don't actually apply this and soon, then all that watching and note-taking you just did is going to be for naught. You want this to stick, so you have to do something with it. The other thing, the other little piece of your homework is in the next month, what I want you to do is to see hand lettering. Look for hand-lettered signs in grocery stores, in Trader Joe's. Everywhere you go, look for examples of hand lettering. This could be old Fillmore posters. Look at graffiti by the side of the road. There's some brilliant hand lettering going on there, and lots of ideas that you can steal. And it's playful. And kind of like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, look what they're doing inside the letter. And then see what you can do to adopt this onto some of your journal pages. And this is not, so one thing that happens is it makes your page graphically more interesting. But it actually is not just about making your journal page look prettier. Here's the cool thing. When you are looking at one of your journal pages and you're thinking like, what is the big picture? What am I looking at? You're doing what we call metacognition. You're thinking about what you've been thinking about. And if you want to do better thinking, it turns out if you think about what you've been thinking about, this is better. And so you'll remember things more vividly if you give yourself the opportunity to back up from it, think what is the big picture? Right? And to create a title for that, you're doing metacognition, creating some titles and subtitles around the page. Is your Africa journal handy? So creating some titles and subtitles around your page, and so, you know, so looking here, am I close enough to the screen? Right, a little bit closer. All right, and up. All right, so here, you are here. Oh, isn't that so much fun? All right, so I'm going to just, you can look at a number of these pages. Here are the early birds. So they are, you know, you're just starting the trip. All right, and All right. Here are just some other examples. I'll bet we can find that. Well, here you are in Tarangire National Park. Oh, there you are in Tarangire National Park. I mean, just look at these in terms of titles, subtitles. You know, here's the species that you have. Here's the little subtitle for the night safari. All right. I gotta find that zebra moment, just because it was so cool. Oh, here you are. So here's big title. You're on the Serengeti. All right. Third day's the charm. Right. And oh, there it is. Aha! We found the zebras. And look at how much fun you can have. So what can you do creatively in your journal? So this March of the Zebras thing, it's not just about making this page look pretty. What you're seeing here is metacognition made visible. And you can do it too.